Hi, everyone. Welcome to Authentic Expressions. Welcome to this session on how to be kind to yourself when you mess up. So be sure to post your questions. And again, I am going to share with you the sponsorship video. And we want to thank Laurel Ridge for sponsoring this program.
Live stream is sponsored by Laurel Ridge Treatment Center. Laurel Ridge Behavioral Health Program offers compassionate care for every stage of life. It provides personalized treatment for all populations. Their interest is to help you into your journey to wellness. There are services for children, adolescents, adults, military dependents, active duty service members, veterans, and first responders. They offer inpatient services, outpatient services, substance abuse treatment, and residential treatment. Call 210-491-3591 for no-cost assessment. Laurel Ridge is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Their mission is to save lives, heal families, and create hope.
All right.
This YouTube live stream is sponsored by Laurel.
Okay. All right. Welcome. Welcome back. I see some familiar names, and thank you for taking time to join the session. So today's topic is how to be kind to yourself when you mess up. So would love to hear your questions. So welcome back, Dora, Claudia, Cheryl, EK, Zach, Bridget, Brittany, Haley. Wow, nice. Okay. So, what are some questions that you might have about being kind to yourself when you mess up? So, let's hear your questions. Okay, Claudia has a question. When I make a mistake, even a small one, I find it to be very hard. I tend to be very hard on myself. What are some practices to silence that inner critic and show myself more compassion? That is a great question. I love that you said two of these opposing voices. So first is the inner critic, and then to show yourself more compassion. So compassion is not commonly used in our lives. We tend to show it to other people, but in being kind to ourselves, it's important for us to show ourselves compassion and empathy. We tend to be better at criticizing ourselves and complaining about ourselves. But in being kind, allow yourself room to make mistakes. Mistakes are stepping stones to growth. And so mistake doesn't mean you fail, but it's a stepping stone to the next lesson. So be sure to show yourself compassion. If you take out complaint and put in more compassion, how might your energy be different? So if we continuously focus on being gracious, being empathic, and being compassionate to ourselves, it might change the way we look at mistakes. So it is easy for us to show empathy to others, but we have difficulty showing empathy to ourselves. So these are the things for you to think about. Don't always complain about you, because you too are like other people. You are given room to make mistakes, and mistakes is part and parcel of your growth. All right. Welcome, Lindsay. Glad you are here. Okay, what are some additional questions that you all might have? So Lindsay goes, what are practices we can try to work on improving our empathy towards ourselves? Okay, wonderful. So in being empathic to ourselves, you have to think about some ways to let go of perfectionism. We are very good at thinking that perfectionism will get us to the top, will help us reach our goals. But the more perfectionistic expectations, the more frustration that you will have, because perfectionism is something that's unreachable. So if you can work towards being human, that is more reachable. So if you eliminate some of these things like perfectionism, high standards, standards is to reach the next level, but don't make it so high and unreachable that your life is, lived on a very tight rope. So show yourself empathy by letting go of perfectionistic expectations, being in tune to your emotions. Do you typically complain about yourself because you are not fulfilling somebody's expectations, be it your parent or your supervisor or your siblings, or your friends? So if you again remove external expectations and be more in tune to your internal voices, empathy might show up. Then you might be more in tune to who you are, what your needs are, rather than living life based on some external expectation that you continually trip over. Because when we don't connect to our expectations, it seems like it's more difficult for us to show empathy. So Brittany has a question. How do you stop the habit of negative self-talk when something goes wrong? How do you challenge your thinking process when you encounter mistakes? Great question. So negative self-talk, let's take that piece first. So negative self-talk is habitual. So you have to think about how long have you had these negative self-talk. Look at the history of your self-talk. Has it been in your system forever? Meaning since your teenage years, since your, pre-adolescent years. And what do you, in this self-talk, what do you continuously complain about? What do you whine about yourself? Are you taking on the self-talk that was passed on to you by your parent, or did you create some new self-talk? So it's important to look at the self-talk. Many times these self-talks are very global, and we go, okay, it's one big glob. But if you can separate it out, is your self-talk constantly about your performance? Is it constantly about your failure? Is it constantly about wanting acceptance, wanting approval? So if you can separate it out and look at what is it surrounding and the history of it, and if you are even taking on the self-talk based on something that your parent, your significant person in your life has passed on to you. So eliminate it. Don't just be robotic and just keep, embracing self-talk without evaluating, without critical thinking. So learn to pause and look at the emotions that drive this self-talk. Is it your need for acceptance by your parent that drives you to keep perpetuating this self-talk and keep beating yourself up? So think about, do you always complain about your friend when you're around them? Well, if you don't, then think about, do you always complain about yourself when you do something right or wrong? You always even when you do it right, do you complain about how you've missed the other half of the goal? So that's the first part of your question. The second part is, how do you change your thinking process when you encounter mistakes? Again, I'm going to use the other words. Again, be gracious, be kind, be empathic, be self-accepting, and be reasonable. Don't, have high standards for yourself, but then low standards for other people. So If you are gracious to your friend, show the same level of graciousness to yourself. All right, EK has a question. When your mistakes hurt someone else, how do you be kind to yourself without coming off as callous? Great question. So when your mistake hurts others, great. How do you be kind to yourself? So you might want to think about your mistakes in terms of, you know, you're learning to relate. Your mistake was not an intentional, was not a purposeful mistake, that you went all out to hurt the other person. If you find that you have hurt the person or have been unthinking or not thoughtful, it might be important to apologize rather than keep it to yourself and then struggle with it internally. It's also important to let people know, I was thinking about this, so I'm not sure if I came across as unkind, uncaring. So go back and revisit that scene with the person that you felt like you were callous with. So even in counseling sessions, when you forget to ask a question, you have the liberty to go back and say, hey, I forgot to ask this last week, but I do want to follow up. So I was thinking about this. Then you deliver your question. So in friendships, we too can go back and revisit things. It doesn't mean that everything is terminal, that we cannot go back and visit. So if you forgot to say something, if you want to go back and revisit and say something, let the person know I was thinking about this, because people appreciate intentional thoughtfulness. So it's not a one-time situation where you cannot go back and visit. So always go back and express yourself and ask the person how you came across, how it sat with them, rather than assume that, they too see you as callous. So having open conversations will allow you to deepen other thoughts, deepen, how you come across, how whatever you say may sit with a person. So what kind of experiences does being self-critical stem from? What kind of experiences? So if you can go back into your history, think about how thoughts are formed, how you learn. In preschool, we learn our alphabets by repeating it for a good 9 months. We learn from A through Z with a lot of repetition the first 9 months in our kindergarten or pre-kindergarten. So with self-criticism, did we learn to criticize ourselves every time we made a mistake? Somebody said, see, you are messy again. See, you're always forgetful. And then you repeat what was said to you, and you beat yourself over the head repeatedly. And you have this internal voice that reminds you, hey, don't mess up. Don't be callous. Don't be this. So when you focus on the don'ts and you say this to yourself day in, day out, every day for the 20 years of your life, then these thoughts become our internal dialogue. Then they sit in our headspace, and it's hard to erase it. It's not impossible, but we want to look at the emotions that drive these self-talk, that drive these, self-criticism. So just like it grew into our headspace over time, you can use kindness to erase that. So you don't want to be self-critical. You want to be what? You want to be self-compassionate. So you want to be more empathic. You want to be more reasonable. So think about new self-talk that you want to include. All right. So Dora has a question, and I would love to have other questions or other self-talk that you want to discard. So I'm going to go with Dora's question. How can I control the anxiety when I make a mistake? So you have to think about whether you come or live in an anxious space over time. So, does your anxiety take over in your daily life? And does your anxiety drive you to make mistakes? Or do you feel like your mistakes causes you anxiety? Kind of like the chicken or the egg. So if you live in a state of anxiety, fearing mistakes, then the chances of mistakes showing up is going to be higher. So it is important to think about what drives your anxiety. How can you live with more courage, live with other emotions, live with hope, live with compassion? So if you get hung up on anxiety, it's going to be very present in your life. Then are you worshiping the God of anxiety? So there are lots of other emotions, but where did you learn to embrace anxiety? Whom did you see take on anxiety? And that you, like the person in your family, your significant relationship, you function in anxiety. Like anxiety becomes the fuel for your functioning. So if this is what you're dealing with, it's important to address the root of your anxiety. It's important to address how failure is preached, and then look at those reasonably, and then look at how you can infuse hope, infuse caring, nurturing. So these are the things you want to include and infuse into your daily space rather than just be so fixated on anxiety. All right, Haley, welcome. So the question from Haley is, what is the best way to own a mistake when you know that you have made one? We are all human. How do you call it out? Excellent question. So to own your mistake, if you're in the presence of the person, after you say something, you found that, okay, it didn't come out as well as you wanted to deliver it. So it's often important to say, okay, let me redo this. Let me go back and restate this in a way that I want it to be expressed. So when you apologize and say, I want to redo this, people will be more accepting. So even in a session, in a counseling session, we may have delivered something incorrectly. We can go back the next week or the week after and say, when we were talking about this, I forgot to ask this and it came out differently. So let me re-ask this in a different way. So give yourself grace. Don't expect everything that come out of your mouth to be correct and to be well stated. So allow yourself room to go back and have an eraser and say, I want to say it this way. And sometimes when it's a long conversation with a lot of complicated thoughts, write it out, read it to yourself, read it to a friend and see, how does it sound? Does it convey the message you want to convey? So don't just give yourself one chance, give yourself multiple opportunities. In new situations, when it's in a meeting, write it down, say it out loud and see how it sounds. Same thing. When you're having deep conversations and the delivery did not go as well, learn to restate it. Okay, Carolyn, welcome. How do you work through anger when you make a mistake? So besides anger, I'm hearing that it could be hurt or it could be disappointment. Like I'm disappointed with myself again that I made the same mistake. And you said, I don't want to make that mistake again, but you find yourself making the same mistake. So I'm hearing that you're disappointed or maybe discouraged that the mistake showed up again. So it may be important to think, you don't want the mistake, but what do you want? So if you focus on the mistake, that it will show up continuously. But if you focus on the change behavior, then you're more likely to get the change behavior. So even change, like wanting to stop smoking, that is not change, but wanting to live a healthy lifestyle, that is the change direction. So highlight what you want, so you're discouraged, but go back and go, you want to feel encouraged about this. So identify what you want to see implemented. So again, when you put in the positive and you implement that, that will, it'll be more likely that you reach your change. Okay. Thanks for the question, Carolyn. Dora goes, I think being a people pleaser caused me to feel anxious about mistake. Okay, very good thought. So being a people pleaser is learned from somewhere. So you may want to think about, where did you learn? How was this ingrained into your headspace that you have to please people? And your job is to make other people happy, but you forgot to factor yourself in. Your job in life is to advocate for you, to be your spokesperson, and to be intentional about you, your decisions, your goals. Your life is not about always pleasing other people. Yes, you want to get along, but if you spend energy being a people pleaser, then you're depleting yourself. So you have to think about the importance of that. Are you rigidly hung up on the idea that your job in life is to serve others and be a people pleaser? So then it deprives you of being true to yourself. It deprives you of being authentic to your own needs, being connected to your own needs. So just because you did people pleasing for a lot of years in your life, do you still need to do it? So think about the options you have. We all have options, but do we choose our options, or we get fixated on options that are not healthy for us? All right, welcome, Felicia. All right, thanks. Great advice to redo and apologize. Yes, we can always go back and redo. So our voice, we have an eraser, we have a verbal eraser. Use it. Erasers are not just in written format. So use your verbal eraser and your magic marker. So giving yourself grace to heal. Thank you, Haley. All right, Julia, welcome. I find myself being impatient with myself when I make a mistake. What are ways to process and be gentle with myself when I am also getting frustrated at my pace? So again, multiple parts to this question. You're impatient with yourself when you make mistakes. So you want to be gentle. You want to give yourself room to grow. So think about your expectations. You want to grow and you want to grow immediately, or you want to grow and you want to grow graciously. Your habits was formed over a period of 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. Whatever your age is, if you're 20, it took a good 15 years for those habits to cement, to form. But when we change, we want the change to occur immediately and almost like instantly. If it occurred yesterday, that would be the best. So think about, it took a while for things to form. So it's going to take a while for habits to new habits to surface. So you have been impatient with yourself, just like you may have seen other people in your life being impatient with themselves. You see other people complain about themselves. So do you want to follow that energy, or do you want to enter into different energy in your life, in your headspace? So again, people don't realize that they complain about themselves continuously. So I want to ask, what are some things you can do? Why, tell me the importance of beating up yourself and complaining about yourself. Is it critical that you do that repeatedly? So are you better at highlighting your mistakes, or are you better at highlighting your growth? Chances are we are all better at highlighting our mistakes, because we saw our parents do that. We saw our parents complain about us when we made mistakes. But very seldom do parents say, when you make a mistake, it's okay. We can all learn from it. We can all grow from our mistakes. And if we have that reminder that mistakes are stepping stones, are learning opportunities, chances are we'll be kinder to ourselves. All right. So Dora has, Caroline, that's a good question. Focusing on my mistake does cause me to make more little mistakes. Yes. The more you focus on your faults, your mistakes, the more that this is going to show up. So whatever you spend your energy on, that will be what your focus will be. So great questions. Hi, Morgan. Welcome. Glad you're here. So I like these questions. Okay, I am going to read some reminders. From last week, we talked about let go. Okay. So I'm going to read some reminders to you about letting go. Let go of masking your true feelings. So being kind to yourself also means that you're in touch with your feelings, that you don't mask them. Share your feelings with people that have space for you to be genuine. Let go of the perfect son, daughter, son, daughter, spouse, image. Your job is to always be true to you and not live life based on what others want. Like Adora said, you've been a people pleaser. So think about other options rather than just being people pleaser. In life, we have options. So look at what your options are and not just get hung up on one prescription. Let go of fractured relationships, people who keep reminding you of your mistakes. Let go of people who manipulate you so that you can do things to serve them or be in their best interest. So in being kind to yourself, you also want to be able to identify and call out behaviors or relationships that are not healthy for you. All right. Okay, thank you. Great questions. So our time is up and it's 8:29. So Marcia, welcome. So glad you are here. I love the questions you ask. I'm going to ask you to write down one kind thought, one kind behavior that you can practice this week before I put on the sponsorship video. What is a kind practice that you can implement this week? Anyone? Would love to hear your thoughts. All right, I'm going to remind you then, if I don't hear, now that we are about to close. So again, take out the self-critic, put in the self-compliment, put in the compassion, put in empathy, put in kindness, put in nurturing. Think about implementing these in your life rather than the voice of the harsh critic. So always be compassionate to yourself. Make that your priority. So thank you so much for joining the session. Okay, Carolyn said, give myself grace for the things I do well. I like that. Awesome. That's a good practice, Carolyn. So next week, the topic is on breaking the habit of constant comparison. Comparison, a toxic behavior. So let's look at that next week. Remember to jot down your questions and come with questions next week. Thank you for joining the session this evening. And I'm going to play the sponsorship video.
Laurel Ridge Treatment Center. Laurel Ridge Behavioral Health Program offers compassionate care for every stage of life. It provides personalized treatment for all populations. Their interest is to help you into your journey to wellness. There are services for children, adolescents, adults, military dependents, active duty service members, veterans, and first responders. They offer inpatient services, outpatient services, substance abuse treatment, and residential treatment. Call 210-491-3591 for no-cost assessment. Laurel Ridge is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Their mission is to save lives, heal families, and create hope.
All right. Thank you for taking time to join me in this live stream. Have an awesome week ahead and continue to show kindness, compassion to yourself. Thank you again and look forward to seeing you next week related to topic on constant comparison.